So yeah, welcome to our knowledge share session on psychological safety. We're just going to be taking you through who me and Emerson are, a little bit of an introduction, some really useful information, and then hopefully you'll go away with some tips on how you can bring more psychological safety to your teams. So we wanted to put this on because me and Emerson both run large teams, and it's a really important topic. So not only did we want to refresh ourselves on this topic, but we also wanted to share that out as well. So yeah, this is just going to be a quick 25-minute run through, and it's going to be more of a lecture style just because of the short amount of time that we have. But if you do have questions throughout, then just pop them in the chat and we'll reserve some time at the end, and we can go over them then. So yeah, without further ado, I will let Emerson introduce himself.
Hi everybody. So I'm Emerson Scotland, as Anna's mentioned. I go by the title now of a leadership coach. So I'm guiding outcomes. So my background is in projects and programs within IT. And I actually ran a project management consultancy as well within Agile. I've always been about people, what makes people tick, and how you can get the best out of people within their teams and them as individuals. So a bit of that will come through the presentation, but time is of the issue, so I'll hand back over to Anna. She can introduce herself too.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm me, Anna Bromley. So I run a company called Agile Project Delivery. I manage large transformations in the CRM, customer relationship management space. But I'm also really interested in training and learning and growing and building a community of people who, want to make a world a better place through delivery or through the means that are available to them. I do also offer online training as well. And just a little bit of a story about how I met Emerson. We met about 6 years ago on in a company for a project that we were both a part of, and we actually bonded over the fact that our second names both are the name of places. So Emerson obviously is Scotland, and I'm Bromley. So if you're in the southeast, you'll know that Bromley is in Kent. So that's a little interesting fact about how I got to know Emerson. But anyhow, so for the main part of this knowledge share, so we're going to be talking about why psychological safety is so important, how that connects to emotional intelligence, how psychological safety actually enables emotional intelligence, the cost if you create an environment that doesn't have psychological safety, some of the success patterns, so what we see is as good practice basically in organizations that we've been in, and then some practices from both a leadership and a team perspective that are really good to see. And then, as I said, I want to leave everyone with some really practical tips that they can go away and actually implement in their day-to-day lives, either personally or professionally, so that when you walk away from here today, you actually can implement some of these steps practically, because I'm all about that. So, why psychological safety is mission critical. I suppose the key word in this top area here really is about uncertainty. Like, we're living in an extremely uncertain time. So there's remote work, there's AI, there's economic, there's political disruption, and people and teams work best when they feel safe. So if you think about it, if you're not in a safe environment, you're not going to reach out, you're not going to talk, you're not going to discuss ideas, you're not going to share your fears with people, that you can try and work through them. So really, psychological safety is about fostering that environment so that people can actually tackle these issues. And if we are in an uncertain environment, then gosh, it's going to be really important that people do actually raise concerns, communicate with one another. So that's kind of echoed by this quote that I've put down here. In volatile environments, psychological safety becomes your competitive edge. The reality is, if you want that strategic advantage, your teams are going to have to be high functioning teams, and therefore they're going to have to feel psychologically safe, because if you want them to work together, to build solutions together, to come up with new ideas, then they're only going to do that if you create an environment which is safe for them to do so. So if you're in a team environment or a work environment where there's rapid change or a need to innovate, then psychological safety is even more mission critical, because fear doesn't generate good outcomes, and people collaborating, learning and growing together So it's really of the essence to make, if you want that strategic competitive environment, to make psychological safety a priority. I think that's all I wanted to say on this one, Emerson. So unless you've got anything else, I'll then hand over
No,
to you.
well summed up. But I want everyone to just dwell for a little bit on the quote that Anna's used from Amy Edmondson, because that's quite prevalent throughout the rest of the conversation that we have today. But I'll expand a bit on that, and I'm sure Anna will too. Yep, ready to go, Anna. Okay, so we've said psychological safety, we've said emotional intelligence, but what do these terms really mean? So using our friend Amy Edmondson again, I just want to read this quote out. I know we can all read, but sometimes when you say these things, it resonates a bit more. So psychological safety is a shared belief held by team members that it's okay to take risks, express their ideas, concerns, and speak up with questions and admit mistakes without fear of negative consequences. So that's the psychological safety, quite powerful there. You know, that we've got some key words: shared belief, expression of your ideas, concerns, and the ability to speak up around a safe space, which is without fear of negative consequences. And then we move down to emotional intelligence. It's that ability to make emotions work for you, right? So it's that ability to make your emotions work for you. And that's internally, and that's with speaking to others. Okay. And that was by Daniel Goleman, psychologist and author. Does a lot of great work. So there are 4 pillars around emotional intelligence, and they are your self-awareness, which I've mentioned before, your self-management, and that's about your emotions. How do I regulate those things? So when you're in the midst of delivery and things are happening and somebody says we've got an error, are you losing it at the first instance, or are you more measured and composed and looking how it affects the bigger picture? Your social awareness. What's the situation around? What are we facing at the present? And how you connect to people. That's the relationship management. So that's your stakeholders, other people in the business, your suppliers. Thanks, Anna. I think that's it for me on that bit. So, how does psychological safety enable emotional intelligence? Now, emotional intelligence thrives in environments that offer psychological safety, because if you can be emotionally secure, you'll feel you're in a safe space to say what you want to say, which is what I mentioned in the previous quote. And I've put 2 symbols here on the slide, as you can see, but the top one is really key. We can't improve what we can't discuss. So if I feel unsafe in my environment and it's a culture that's not allowing for me to speak about how I feel or speak up about things that we should be doing, we can't improve. And that's quite obvious. If I don't know what we're not doing right, how can I move forward if I'm not getting that advice or speaking to other people in the team? So that was by Douglas Stone, which is quite powerful. Harvard are coming out with some real good stuff. Um, so psychological safety lets you be emotionally honest, while emotional intelligence gives you the skills that you can be honest in an effective way. Yeah, that's what we're trying to say. Yeah, so emotional intelligence gives you that safety and that honesty, and allows you to then express what you want to say in a calm and safe environment without you being judged. So psychological safety and emotional intelligence, they reinforce each other. They work hand in hand, right? So another key thing to take away today is, without psychological safety, emotional intelligence is stunted. You can't be yourself. You can't be expressive. You can't be emotive. And without emotional intelligence, psychological safety is difficult to establish. So if I don't connect, if I don't set the environment, if I don't create that culture, we're not going to get that psychological safety. We're not going to have those moments during delivery where somebody knows that something's not right, but they're scared to express it. That's money that's going to be lost. If we don't speak up, there's the financial cost that comes around with that as well. So it's more than just the connections you have. There is some financial factors that we should consider too. Thank you, Anna. Okay, so I alluded to the cost a bit earlier there. So we're going to look at the hidden price, how lack of psychological safety undermines your team. So we've got 4 areas here. You've got your toxic workplaces, you've got the delivery speed, you've got holding back of knowledge, and you've got the impact on the end result, the impact on your outcomes. So what we find typically in toxic workplaces, this reduces the team productivity by between 15 and 20%. That's a large chunk of reduced productivity. Yeah. And then your individual loses focus by up to 40% because they could be handling conflicts. They might not have the team that's motivated. Yeah. So they're having to pick up on their colleagues not doing as much as they should be. So not everyone's going to be pulling their weight. And as an individual, that reflects on the team. So people get into individual brackets and do what they want to do. And increases the turnover. You start losing people. You get burnout and people just don't want to innovate anymore because their creativity is lost. And then we go into that delivery speed. So what we find with elite teams, they continuously work at it. They deploy it continuously on demand, and they're agile enough to do other things that are needed to get the project moving or get whatever that delivery thing is. But low performing teams, they just deploy less often. It's on a monthly basis, or there's less indication or a less visibility of a strong culture within them, hence showing they've got a weak culture and a weak system of producing the work that they use. Their delivery mechanisms are a lot weaker. And then we go on to knowledge hoarding. And we've all been in those situations sometimes when we know certain teams and departments are withholding information that could help us to do something quicker or a bit more smarter. And that could be a sign of that lack of psychological safety and that lack of emotional intelligence to know when to share and when to protect and when to offload with the information that we have. So you get defensive behaviors. So people hide information. They undermine each team. So there's that clash of departments. This damages collaboration and frustrates and slows down open learning. One of the main things that I love is a book by Peter Senge called The Learning Organization, where he advocates open learning, continuous improvement. Things like that about damaging the collaboration, they'll be gone because you won't get that because people aren't interested. And to just top that up, it limits organization innovation. So teams can't innovate, teams can't move quickly and agilely because the knowledge hoarding is holding things back. And then it has the ultimate impact. It's the impact on the outcomes. You get the slower delivery. You get the reduction in the product quality. The product that you bring out to market is not that great because the quality goes down. So these are the negative impacts that affect your competitive advantage ultimately, because you're not as competitive as others in your field or other teams that you're working with. You just don't have it anymore. Thank you, Anna. Sorry, just admit this person. Thank you, Anna. Yeah. So what are the success patterns that you see when you're building psychological safety? So here's 5 proven patterns for team success. So concerns. Create forums, for raising concerns so that people can say what's going wrong, what could we do better, what can we improve on. Allow people to speak up, anytime. Not necessarily, I don't mean anytime they want to speak to every 5 minutes. I don't mean it like that. But let's create a way where they can speak up and say what they want to say, where it's constructive and move things forward. Okay. Challenges. So you model your work challenges as learning problems, not execution problems. So that's sharing, like we have, the lessons learned logs and things like that, where people can put what could be have done been better, like retrospective, put things down so people are aware of them. What can we build on? What was a challenge before? And then you can look back and think that used to be a problem. It no longer is. Let people know what your learnings are. Emotions, which are very important. Create an environment where expressing those emotions constructively, is valued. Because once you create that environment, as I said, you've got the psychological safety, so people feel comfortable to do it. And then you become more, well, it takes a while for this to occur, but your emotional intelligence comes to the fore. Yeah, people start connecting, people start being freer with their information, their feedbacks, as long as it's all constructive. And that has to be managed as leaders, right? We've got to manage that environment. So it's not things that just happen. You've got to create that culture. And the candor, you know, practice radical candor, care personally, challenge directly. Yeah, when you're in those meetings and you're not doing it in an aggressive way, you're asking for further clarification, further understanding. Once we get that further understanding, we get that learning. It's about creating those environments. And this leads to what I've alluded to a long way along the presentation, is that culture. Yeah, that great quote by Peter Drucker: culture eats strategy for breakfast. Because if you've got that foundation of a culture, and these are the norms, these are the behaviors that we want to instigate, you've got a platform to build on. It's going to be strong because people know the expected behaviors, people know how we speak to each other, people know what we expect, people know how we work, and that starts to build. And before you know it, your foundations are strong. I think that sums it up with the final bit about leadership practices and team practices. How do we cultivate that safety through mindset and behavior, which I spoke about earlier, getting that mindset in the right place? So from a leader's perspective, you've got to start embracing growth. Yeah, I use a phrase called project and reflect. If I want my team to do certain things, I start behaving in that certain way, and then they will follow suit. Yeah. So demonstrate openness and vulnerability. Have that old phrase, an open door policy, where people can come to speak to you and share their emotions, share their ideas, share their feelings. Address challenges with a growth mindset. So it's not, well, why do you say that? Maybe say, any other ideas on how we can grow this? Or where do you perceive the problem to be? So take it with that growth mindset so we can build on what has just been said. View setbacks as lessons. How can we improve here? What are the learnings that we can take forward? And I think in the statements that I've made as examples, I'm trying to say encouraging curiosity, getting people to ask those thoughtful questions. So when you're in those team meetings, put things out to people to say, where can we improve? What did we do right? Are our suppliers doing it differently to us? How are we perceived? Can we improve the processes? Things like that. And then from a team perspective, getting that shared accountability. It's everyone's responsibility to do this. Yeah. So hold your colleagues accountable, hold them responsible. Practice curiosity instead of judgmental behaviors. Yeah. Be curious about what's going on around you. Use I statements so that you own it. Yeah. I'm owning this because this is serious. Yeah. I'm not gonna give this over to Anna. I'll own it, my bit, and Anna will do the same for her bit. She will own it. And you acknowledge others' contribution. Yeah. It's always good to acknowledge what other people are doing to show that they are making an impact on the bigger picture, because every little bit that we all do is helping to make the bigger whole. And address tensions within one day. If you don't do that, that's where conflict occurs. And I'm an advocate of conflict because it helps the team to grow, and it helps you to build out whatever that problem is. But if you allow tensions to fester, they then become negative, and you won't get that emotional intelligence, and you won't get that psychological safety. So one of the main things on this slide here is about the tensions. Don't let them grow because they can become detrimental. Anna, I think over to you now.
Yeah, that's a good point to leave it with me. That last one around tensions and addressing them quickly is one I find particularly challenging because of my emotions, because I often want to let my emotions settle before I then address tension. So I find that concept quite challenging myself, but I'm definitely open to trying it. So yeah, I wanted to wrap up this conversation on psychological safety with some really like practical tips, as I said, about things that you can actually do today or next week when you're back in work, or indeed with your family, if you want to create a more psychological safe environment there. And I liked these. So be a first follower. So what does a first follower mean? It means if you see someone demonstrating the behaviours that we've just talked about, being open, being vulnerable, asking curious questions, learning from setbacks, making mistakes, be quick to validate and support that person that's speaking up. I've got a little plus, like a little emoji plus over there, like, follow, engage, celebrate. I think that's really important, because if you do that with people that are role modeling that behavior, it sort of it validates it basically, and it's encouraging for other people to do the same. So the second point would be around celebration of failures. So when things go wrong and things don't quite go to plan, like they always do, instead of taking them in a negative light, then signal to the people in that environment that this is, a great opportunity to learn. Again, accept the failure and what failures bring, the learning, the lessons, and again, that's a really clear indication that you're working in a much more, psychologically safe environment, because people then won't feel scared to go outside of, like innovate, go outside of their comfort zones, because, if they fail, it's celebrated anyway. So, what's there to fear ultimately? So I think that's really, really good. Another one, the silent start, is kind of if you're in an environment where you might have more introverts, typically, who don't say too many things. So these people often, I count myself as one of them, situationally, a lot of the time, to be quite introverted, need sometimes more time or more opportunity to actually speak up and give input. So being brave enough to start a conversation or a meeting silently, with people having time to write down their ideas before going around and diving straight into a discussion. So this is another like really useful tool or tactic to be able to get people to feel that their thoughts and their ideas are valid and they're heard. So that's a nice one to do. I do think that one takes a little bit more bravery though, because in a corporate setting like the one I'm in, it would be quite unusual to start a meeting in that way. But I will do it, and I feel like I will write down my experience and whether it was a good one on that one. Another one is obviously just asking people directly via a poll, some sort of poll. There's like lots of tools these days, Slack, Teams, where you can create anonymous polls, so you can just get a sense check on how people are feeling from a safety perspective. And I think there's more knowledge these days about these sort of new psychological terms and like what they mean. So I would say it's more reasonable to think that if you were to pose a question like that you would get some interesting responses back. And I think the best way to know anything really is just to sort of poll it out and get the quantitative data, if you like, about how people are perceiving things. And then another one would be the vulnerability kickoff. So if you are having a conversation or in a meeting or something, then feeling okay about sharing something that's maybe a little bit challenging, or it's causing you a bit of an issue, or for you to get some emotion about, because people like stories and they feel personally connected and safer when they're in an environment where people can share what's going on in their day-to-day life and what's happening. So that one I've called there the vulnerability kickoff. It's just opening up dialogue with how you're feeling maybe, or something that's happened to you today, that can all indicate that you're in an environment where you feel safe and you feel comfortable, therefore like modeling what that behavior would look like in an organization. So they're my top five. I'm gonna do my best to foster those in my teams, and so I'm sharing those out with you all as well. And I just wanted to end with this really lovely quote that Emerson found, actually. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed people can change the world. And I think it's a nice place to end after I've given you a couple of small tips to go away in your own day-to-day lives, so that you can help other people in your environment feel safer and therefore innovate more, create more, collaborate more, which is all positive things that the world really needs, basically. So that brings us to the end, Emerson. Let me see if we have had any questions popped in the chat.
Yes, there were a couple, and I tried
Yes.
to answer a few as you were
Oh, well
guiding
done.
us
For
on your bit of
multitasking.
the slides. Yeah, all
So
about the
we've got
multitasking.
we've got people from the US here, which is so wonderful. Hello, hello. Yes, we're going to share the PowerPoint slides around. Could you
Yeah.
share your perspective on the impact of favouritism and how to tackle it? I have to leave that one to you, Emerson, I think.
Okay. Favoritism. So this is the thing. I answered the question a bit earlier about project and reflect. Favoritism is never a good thing once we let it be shown publicly. So as a leader, or people running teams, we've got to be very careful of that, because that can affect morale, that can affect people's productivity. So in all cases, I just advocate that you've got to be professional. You may acknowledge that people in your team have a higher skill base than others, and you can trust them. Yeah. So look at your team, and look at the skill sets, and then look at those individuals that are best suited for the task that you need. So that way you're doing it in a practical way. You're not being subject to favoritism. You're just going on a skill base, or a mentality, or a temperament base. That's what I can say at this stage. But if you want to reach out for more, drop Anna and I an email if there's other areas on that you want to cover, because it could be in delivery, which Anna's specialising in as well. I've got a bit of experience as well, obviously, but we can split the paths. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, that was good. So we're at 1:30 now, but we've got some really interesting questions here. How to approach rudeness and disrespect? How do you measure psychological safety? So maybe if I just say a couple of words, and then we
Yeah,
can
go
wrap
for it, Anna.
up. How do we approach rudeness and disrespect? Well, I think it's about being firm with our response. Personally, this is my approach. I'm not an expert in in these things. This is just how I deal with it. It's not actually not lowering myself in any way, and I also don't want to respond in an overly emotional way. I know that we've just been talking there about emotional intelligence and things like that. So I often do want to take a step back. I'll probably also want to play that back with people that are trusted for me and the situation, and do some reflection myself and understand how I might respond, if it's something that I can possibly move myself away from for a period of time before coming back to it. But it's very difficult. And then on the how do you measure psychological safety? I think unless you're going to do some sort of survey where you have like all of the factors that are key indicators of psychological safety, like how much do you trust your teammates? Do you like your leaders here? Like these sorts of questions. Then it obviously has to be a personal check-in, like with individuals, one-to-ones. Are they being open with you? Do they like working there? How much have they delivered? What are the outcomes? Are they being successful? Do they feel motivated in their day-to-day? Are they not burnt out? It becomes much more of a conversation. If you're not going to gather the quantitative data. Do you have any final thoughts on those, Emerson, you want to add?
No, I think you've covered it all really, but I think just going back to the slides, it's about creating the environment and the behaviours that you expect. Just a bit of theory here. Now you've teased me, and I'll give it to the crowd. So Patrick Lencioni, I don't know if any of you've heard of this guy. Um, he talks about in one of his modules about trust and conflict, right? He thinks that we don't have enough conflict, so we need to have more conflict so that your teams can grow, right? And then there's trust. He says one of the pillars of the five qualities of a good team is one of them is trust. So if you create that environment of trust, you then have that psychological safety which will work with it, because I can trust Anna. Once we finish this, we have a debrief. We trust each other because we've created an environment where we've got that psychological trust when we can talk about many things, and Anna and I have, but that's come from years of creating our foundation of trust and that psychological safety. And it's no different from any relationship that you have. You've got to create an environment so that the other people or the other people feel comfortable to share their thoughts and ideas.
Mm.
Does that make sense, everyone?
Mm. Yeah. And finally, a really good question from Joanna there, how to deal with higher management assigning a task to one person, then going to another person and assigning to them without discussing with the first person assigned. So that's a really interesting one that's happened to me. So what I would do in that context is try and address it directly with the individual who's doing it. I know that's hard because it's conflict at the end of the day, but I would probably just say to someone, would you mind if you're going to reassign a task that you would check with me first, because it would have saved me a whole lot of time in the first case, and I want to be, aligned and like feel I can contribute in a meaningful way. If you don't feel that you could do that, then I would try and find a peer of that person, senior management person, and I would probably raise it with them so that they could say it to the other person who's doing this assigning directly. So I would just try and write a note to that person. There's obviously a few ways stylistically of doing it, but that's personally how I would approach it myself. But yeah, it's a terribly difficult situation to be in. So yeah.
Can I just add one last bit to that, Anna, which I think is important as well? And stepping away from them giving the task to, assigning it twice, you then as an individual, this could be your chance to shine as well, because as Anna's alluding to, there's a way of approaching these things, right? So if you approach it with maturity and emotional intelligence to show that, look, this is not right, we shouldn't be doing these kind of behaviors. When they look back and reflect, they'll see, oh my gosh, Anna really handled herself well there, and that was quite a complex situation. So you are your own brand and your own ambassador, so your behaviors are being watched and how you conduct yourself is being watched. So bear that in mind as well. So as well as a mistake happening, you can come out smelling of roses again because you've highlighted the problem, you've challenged it, and then you've moved on.
Amazing. Okay, well, with that, we'll bring it to an end. It was short but sweet, and I hope to see you again soon at another one of our knowledge sharing sessions. Have a wonderful Friday, everyone. Thanks, Emerson.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Anna. Fantastic.
Bye now.